Hello, everyone. My name is Edgar Garcia, and tonight I want to talk about high intensity training for naturals. Um, I've been a wellness coach and a trainer since 1992, and from the beginning, I didn't really start with high intensity training. Now, for those of you who are just tuning in and don't know what high intensity training is, I'm more referring to the high intensity training that Dr. Darden, Arthur Jones, Mike Mentzer talked about in their videos or in their books. High intensity training, by definition, means intense, brief, and infrequent. Those are the three principles that goes into high intensity training. What I mean by that is that the intensity has to be really high. Uh, what I mean by being high is that you have to train to failure. And when I say failure, I don't mean that you totally failed. What I mean is temporary failure, positive failure, I should say. Temporary positive failure. So if you're doing curls, let's say you reach 10, but you have a few more reps you think that you could do, and you do a couple more reps till all of a sudden you're having a hard time completing the last rep, which might be a 12 rep or 13 rep, and you can't move that weight anymore by, not even by an inch, then that's called a positive failure. Now, that is the type of intensity I'm referring to. And then brief means that you don't really spend about 2 hours in the gym. You probably spend about 30 minutes, 40 minutes at most. In my situation, I'm only in the gym for 15 to 20 minutes. And infrequent, you don't go to the gym every day. You go to the gym perhaps every other day, perhaps 3 times a week. In my case, perhaps I'm averaging about 2 times a week. That's what I refer to as infrequent. And there's a reason for all of those. Brief, I already explained to you what training to failure is, positive failure. That's to stimulate the muscles. It sends a signal to your body, and your body adapts to that certain intensity, which is a form of stress. And one thing about our body, we adapt to stress. And brief, we keep it brief because the intensity is so high, you just can't do that for an hour or even 40 minutes. It'll actually break you down really fast. And infrequent, when I say infrequent, what I mean by that is you give your body a chance to recover from the intense, high intensity training. All right. Now, why do I say high intensity training for naturals? It's because I think this is your ace in the hole. I mean, it's high intensity training is just so important. If you really want to make meaningful progress, you have to train in high intensity fashion. There's just no other way. If you're natural, you don't have the convenience of using performance enhancing drugs like steroids. When I first started lifting weights, I was doing 20 sets for major body parts and 12 to 15 sets for minor body parts. And I'm not gonna lie, I did make some progress on that. I would say for the first 6 months, I was making a good steady progress. And then all of a sudden, my progress started to slow down and eventually came to a halt, and I wasn't making any more progress. I got very emotional about it. Perhaps in my view back then, I was probably not training hard enough. So I would go in there in the gym and I would put in more hours, thinking that if you put in more hours, you're training a lot more. So instead of training for an hour, I would end up training for 2 hours. Eventually, I was training for almost 3 hours, so I was in the gym, yeah, for about 3 hours. I remember every time I go in the gym, there would be a clerk at the front desk, and she would often ask me if I brought my tent with me. And I often wonder, what do you mean by that? She thought I was going to pretty much pitch a tent in the gym because she knows that my workouts are very long. And I was training 5 to 6 days a week. I wouldn't say my training was intense or anything. I would probably say it was about medium. So I did make some meaningful gains till all of a sudden, like I said, it slowed down and then eventually came to a halt. It wasn't until I discovered Dr. Darden's book and I started to have a better understanding of what overtraining was, and I didn't even know that such a thing existed because none of the books that I collected from the 80s and 90s talked about overtraining, and not even in the magazines. Surprisingly, it took someone like Dr. Darden, Mike Metzer, Arthur Jones to convince me that I was overtraining. So when I started doing HIIT, all of a sudden I was making progress again, and the progress was very steady. And even to this day, even if I've been training for 40 years now, I'm still making progress. Surprisingly, I still am. I'm not as big as when I was in my 20s, but in my mid 50s, I'm still making steady progress. So I'm very happy about that. Now, if you're natural and if you started doing HIIT, you'll definitely make better gains. Reason being is that you're coming down now from a high volume training to a more high intensity training where again the training is intense, it's brief, and it's infrequent. And all these three will factor in for you to make better gains. And like I said, this is your ace in the hole because as a natural, you don't have that convenience of taking steroids. When my progress started to slow down and eventually came to a halt, a lot of the gym members who back then in the late 80s and 90s were telling me that it was time to start taking steroids. And I promised myself that I wasn't going to get involved in that kind of thing. I didn't want to put anything in my body that would eventually harm me. And believe it or not, a lot of those people who I also called my friends back then are no longer around either because they did took steroids back then, and I mean, if they were still alive, they would probably be in their 60s. Sadly, a lot of them passed away in their late 40s and 50s. So I would deter you from taking any forms of drugs. All right? And then the second thing I wanted to talk about, it is a more lasting progress. Whatever you gain from high intensity training, you definitely will keep it. And surprisingly, to this day, I haven't lost any of my muscle mass that I've gained in my 20s. And I haven't lost much of my strength either. The only thing I've lost was my recovery ability. I don't recover as quick as I did in my 20s, now that in my 50s. Some reason recovery does go down as you age. That's a given. But the progress I've made back then, I'm still keeping it even to this day. If anything, I think I'm much more stronger today than I was in my 20s. The only thing I can't do today was squat 545 pounds like I did back then. I can't do that anymore because of my bad back. And I can't bench press 300 pounds like I did back then because of my shoulders. But other than that, all the rest of the exercises that I've done back then, I'm actually outdoing them and doing better. All right, so progress is more lasting, and progress, not only that, is actually very steady. You make very steady gains. Well, when I started high volume training, I actually made very good progress. It was more immediate. But like I said, it started to slow down and then came to a halt. While as HIIT, my progress is just very steady, very steady. And like I said, even to this day, in my mid-50s, I'm still making good progress. And the third thing I want to talk about is that you'll definitely achieve your full potential with high-intensity training. Like I said, going back again to taking performance-enhancing drugs, the only way you can achieve your full potential with high volume is that if you get into those performance-enhancing drugs like steroids. With HIIT, you'll definitely achieve your natural potentials. All right? It won't be as big as drugs, taking drugs, but naturally you'll achieve a very good gains from HIIT. And again, it's going to be more lasting too. All right? So it's not like drugs. When you get off the drugs, you lose the gains. But with HIIT, when you do it naturally, you keep your gains. Okay? And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try my best and answer them. Perhaps I'll even make a video out of it. Okay? And I just wanted to promote my book, a book that I wrote in 2006. It didn't get published till 2017. And it's called How to Get Rid of Your Skinny Self Through High Intensity Training. And it's on sale at Amazon for only $9. All right, so I hope you buy my book. I would truly appreciate it. All right, God bless you all. Bye-bye.